Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. We're trying to build this 69 Nova for $5,000 in 45 days or so. Now, the floors are pretty rusty, so what we're going to do is we're going to put some floor pan patches in instead of a whole floor. It's about half the money and about half the work to patch the footwells in the car that are rusty, so we're going to get that done right now. Okay, so we've got the floor pan kind of sitting on top here. It's going to give me an idea of where it's going. It's too far forward, I think. It needs to come back a little bit, right around there, because I cut that edge right there. Now it's obviously going to go down some, so I can't mark way up here. I'm going to have to get some more of that cut out, but I kind of got a general idea of where to go. Depending on the edge here along the side, if the very edge of the floor pan is in good shape, I'll actually cut this flange off and lay this on top of the other one instead of doing the whole thing along with the rocker panel. That's kind of how I did the ones on Frank and Nova, and I would prefer to have that. Now, if all this metal down this side is junk, then I'll probably just take it all off and weld it from underneath like the factory one is with little spot welds in it. But anyway, this has got me a starting point. So now I'm going to go ahead and get this one marked, get it cut out, and then I'll do this one first, and then all the others will follow. Okay, so this ought to come out pretty easy now. There we go. Now my torque box goes from right here all the way up here. So I need to get this out, or all this material off the torque box, see what kind of shape that box is in. And there might be a different name for it, but I'm calling it a torque box. Okay, so the torque box itself does not look too rusty. It's a lot thicker metal than the floorboard is, so typically when the floorboard is rusty, the box there is not as bad as the floor. It can be, but sometimes it's not. What I'm going to do is, this thing is tack welded or spot welded down here. I'm going to cut from here to here, and most of this should get out, and then I can drill out individual spot welds or get that piece off of there, and then I can go up here and cut a little higher up and patch in some metal, figure out where my floor pan is going to stop on this one, because like I said, it only comes up about 4.5 or 5 inches into the toe board. So we're going to get this piece cut out, and then we can start trimming that other piece to fit. Okay, well, I've got my piece kind of test fit in there, and it's not exactly where it needs to be. The contours of the reproduction pan are not the same as the original pan, plus the original pan is pretty dented in a few areas. You can see right here in the trans tunnel right here, it's got some damage done to it, so the pan is not sitting down that way like it needs to, which is also causing it not to sit along the rocker like it needs to. It really should be over this way some, so more like that, and then that's up over there. So you know, it's once I cut some of this shorter, because like these contours right here are not exactly the same, so it's not going to set down on there. Once I cut that farther down, it'll be much better. Okay, I need to get clutch pedals, this piece out of the way, so I can get some of this stuff patched up. And do some welding. It looks like they had a clutch explosion or something. You can see under the gas pedal there, the firewall is all mangled. The gas pedal, and I've already hit it a couple times, so it was actually farther up this way, but it's pretty wrinkled up. And that's one reason my patch panel is not fitting well. So I'm going to get the pedals out of the way and kind of figure out how bad that is, get it all cleaned up, get some rust converter on there, see if we can make it look better, get this pocket cleaned all up, and get this thing ready to weld in, and we'll get it fitted a little better too, and then get it ready to weld in. Alright, I got the gas pedal out of the way. You can see the firewall is pretty mangled. Right out of your way, right there. So now I'm fixing to pop the steering column out so that I can get to the brakes, and it's like I said, I'm gonna have to do some work on it anyway. It's kind of mangled up too. So Now this whole plate that goes around the steering column at the bottom is fairly rusty. I'm going to try to get it apart, but I don't know how well it's going to work. All right. Yeah, not a lot left of that. The rubber gasket's still pretty good. Weird. Alright, that's out of the way. Okay, much better. Now I can see a lot better what's going on right here. I'm going to fix that. Get all this cleaned up, get the rust converted on it, get my patch panel fit a little bit better, and then get the firewall cleaned up, all that old insulation off so I don't start a fire when I start welding. Now obviously the original wiring harness had actually caught on fire and melted at some point. You can see right there. So all right. There, much better. Okay, what I did was I went ahead and zip screwed this thing in place. I've got a few screws in it, and it pulled up pretty close in some areas. I'll probably cut this around a different area right here, go across here and not leave as much overhanging. It'll fit better. And then up here, I'll do the same thing. I'll trim some of this. The front end though, I'm going to have to trim this just so it'll fit down in there better. Trim a little bit off the new panel. I don't want this overhanging right there. I'm not sure if you can see that. The get the light down here. The front is pretty good right there, and as it goes across, it gets a little off. The contours of this floor pan are not perfect, obviously, and then the floor that I'm working on, trying to patch it into, is junk. So that's going to create some issues that I'll fix with a BFH, and see if I can get this adjusted down a little bit. So I'm going to weld on this for a minute, see if I can get it to kind of conform a little bit. I may have to take this screw out to let the metal move over, and then put a screw in over here. Okay, that's a whole lot better fit, a lot closer up top. Had to put a couple screws in there, move some screws around, beat on it with a hammer, and now I've got to trim it a little bit, make it fit. I did get it a lot better over here, but it's still not great. But like I said, with what I'm working with, this is going to be fine. Okay, so I've got the panel fit much better. I've got this really close. That pushes down. It's just going to have to be pushed down and tacked, or I might have to screw it down. This is really good. I still got to cut a tiny corner off right here because it's a little bit over on that side. This, once I screw it down, it folds over to where it needs to be, and all of this is fairly tight. So I'm going to go ahead and get the edges cleaned up. Then I'm going to cut this out and make it a nice straight edge around where I have to patch my trans tunnel. Then I'll clean the edges up and weld this panel in. Okay, so I got my reinforcement all cleaned up. I hit it with a wire brush on a drill. Now I'm going to spray some rust converter inside of it, let that cure, and while that's curing, I'm going to be cutting out my transmission tunnel, making that a straighter line. Okay, so I cleaned this edge up, made it a straighter edge. Still got to hit it with the grinder a little bit, but not bad. Now I've got a piece of metal I cut. This is 18 gauge sheet steel. I'm going to screw it down to one side, fold it over, screw it down to the other two sides, get it kind of formed to where it needs to be, and then I'll trim it to fit. Okay, so I've got my patch made. It's a little bit crude, but it certainly will work. And once I weld it down, it'll be a lot nicer. I'll trim up the edge here. This edge doesn't need much, that edge down there does. Not much, but just needs a little bit. Alright, so I'll get the tunnel cleaned up so I can weld this down, and then I'll patch up some of these holes while I'm welding. But really just want to get that welded down so I can get my floor pan put down and welded right here. Okay, I've got all the metal around the edge of where I'm going to be welding cleaned up all the way around. I've got my rust proofing over here. It's dry enough. It's turned all that rust to black. Like I said, I hit it with a wire brush and got it as clean as I could get it with a wire brush, and then I sprayed it with a rust conversion. It works really well. I haven't had any issues with it in the past. So, and then I went around this whole edge and cleaned all that up the best I could. And now I've got my panel. I'm going to screw down and get it tacked in place and welded across the bottom, or down here at the bottom. And then once I get it welded in the bottom, I put the floor pan in and get it tacked in place, and then I'll slowly go around and finish weld all the edges. Okay, so I got most of this side cut out. Now I was hoping I was going to get to save this area and patch around it and not deal with that little torque box or whatever, but there's a pretty good bit of rust there, and some of it is in the actual box itself, so I'll have to clean that out and rust treat it like I did the other side, and that's okay. Now this was pretty bad. It was rusted all the way up into here, so I cut that out. I'll make a patch out of that with some of my scrap sheet metal I got laying around, and because my repair board only goes up about right here, it doesn't go up quite that far. So I'll make part of that and see if I can get it right. This side is there, like the other side wasn't, so that's easier. And right here is got one rough spot right there, a little bit right here, but it's way better than the driver's side was. So I'm going to make that happen. I'm going to go trim my patch panel up now and see how it fits. Okay, I still have to cut that pocket out, but I got my patch pan cut, and the good news is it's going to cover up all of the toe board that I needed. So I'll have to screw it down to get it to bend to where I need to be, and it needs to shift over this way a little bit and line my panel up a little bit. But yeah, it's going to fit really, really well. Okay, so I got this box, I got all the metal trimmed off of it. I got to clean it up now, fix this giant rust hole right here, and the rest of it's pretty solid. Just that one little area where the floor pan was actually touching it and laying up against it, rusted through with the floor pan. So I'm going to get this cleaned up, welded up real quick, then I'm going to get the whole thing rust proofed and get my floor pan fit, get ready to weld. Okay, I got this side prepped to weld. I've got my pocket, I fixed my big rust hole, put a patch right there, cleaned it all out, got it down to pretty clean metal, and then sprayed some rust reformer on it, painted all that up good, so that'll stop that from advancing as fast. I got my holes punched in my pan, so they'll line up with my support tabs here, which on the other one I forgot and had part of it welded before I got those holes done, so I had to do them after the fact, which was a pain in the butt. And I've got some screws to put in here to line everything up, because it's actually going up over that, like that. And you can see my support rail back there. I'm going to have to put some screws in there and pull it up tight. But yeah, time to screw it down and start welding. Okay, so I got the pan screwed in place. I got this screwed down so I can get to my support structure right there. I have to screw some screws in here to bring that up, or pry underneath and push up on it. And part of the problem is these pans, since I'm setting it on top of the other pan, the thickness of the pan is up that much, if that makes sense. But anyway, it'll be fine. I'll have to pry this up or screw this down, beat it down with a hammer. The part from here up is not really formed correctly because it's, usually two pieces, but you hammer enough and it'll fit just fine. Okay, I got my structure welded in. I got my structure welded in, and I had to beat the floor pan down a little bit, pry up on the structure from the bottom to make everything line up, but not too bad. I've got a screw in here holding this. I'm fixing to weld across the top some, get the corner pinned down, and make my way around the panel. Okay, the front floor pans are done. I do have a few spots where I blew through with the welder, like up at the top where the seam is. A couple of little spots, the metal was kind of thin, but I'll be able to weld that up. Not too big of a deal. I have a few holes to clean up on both of them where I blew through, but there's not a lot of those. And then I'm going to finish welding up my holes on the transmission tunnel where it looks like they had 4 different shifters mounted at one time. And then I'll go around the floor pans after I weld up all the holes, and I'm going to put seam sealer around all of it, and then I'll probably clean up the bottom at some point and do the same, maybe not. So now we're going to start on the back floor pans. Okay, so the rear foot wells are not as bad as the front. The driver's side has some rust in this corner, and then all of this is pretty solid right here. And then right about here it gets rusty again, all the way up to here where it's had a bunch of holes drilled in it and a bunch of rust and damage right there. So the passenger side, it's solid back here in the back, no issues there. And then it's got a bunch of rust right here, and then a whole bunch of holes right there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to patch this side. I'm going to start the patch right here and go up to the front. This side I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start the patch here and go up to the front. I'm going to patch this separate because I really don't want to get into this area, even though I have that part on the floor pan. But this area has the reinforcement for the front spring, leaf spring pocket, and I don't want to get into welding on that. It's just a pain, and for what I'm doing, I just need to patch this up, and I can patch this separately. The rest of this is really solid and not even really that much pitting. So I'm gonna get all this cleaned up and get these 2 cut out. All right, I got my 2 floor pans cut out. I did cut this one kind of funny like that. I'm going to try to cut that patch the same way and make it fit so I don't have to put 2 pieces in right there. I left there's a plate on here with the seatbelt bolts. There's a plate on the back. I cut just below that. I'll weld right up to the bottom of the hole there. I just want to stay away from that. I don't want to have to deal with fixing that area later or patching something in, so I wanted to stay below that, even though I could have went up a little higher. Got a few holes here, but I'm right up against that. I've got about a 1/2 inch, maybe less right here from where the reinforcement is under there. And then over here, my reinforcement on the bottom stops right here. There's a spot weld right here. There's some spot welds across here where that plate that holds the spring eye and stuff, it's all right there. The reinforcement for the spring eye. And on the other side, I just went straight across right there, down the edge of the rocker panel, and pretty much across same spot right here where the bolt is. So now I'm going to get these edges cleaned up. I'm going to get my patches cut to fit these holes, and then we're going to see if we can get everything fitted in and welded. Okay, since I'm patching this and I'm not making butt welds, I'm just cutting it out and laying it on top of it, there's some adjustments that have to be made. And you can see on this side, I laid it over the edge way up here, and this pan is actually a little bit higher up than it should be, at least the thickness of the metal itself, because that's how, it should be sitting down in there where that metal is instead of on top of it. So what I'm going to have to do on this side to get that done, I'm going to trim this corner here so my seat bolt hole is there still, even though I don't think it's in good condition. But just for posterity's sake, I'm going to leave it there. Now I've got to beat this down to where I've actually got some fitment here. I've got a few screws in it around 3 corners. This back side, I've got it kind of sitting where it needs to sit. It is right at about the right height because I've pushed it down a little bit. I notched it here so I could weld around and use my factory seatbelt hole. I'm going to have to adjust all of this right here, sitting up kind of high. If the camera can, I think you can see that. And this right here is sitting over. So I'm going to adjust all of this with my hammer real quick, and we'll see how well it fits. Okay, you can see after just a few hits with a plastic hammer, it's a lot better. Now some of this still needs to go over and stay over. I'm gonna have to use my ball peen for that. I'm gonna put a couple of screws in there to pull this side over, but first I'm gonna pull this side, screw this down so that it doesn't try to slide over. I'm just bending right here and I'm not trying to move all this, because if you're trying to bend too much of an area at one time, it's really just going to bounce and it's not going to bend much. Okay, so I got the panel beat into submission and it's pretty close all along here, and I'll put screws along the way as I'm welding it and then weld back up the screw holes. This side's really close, the back is really good, and then all along here I'm on this edge, so that'll be fine. I did have to take my screw out here, put it over here so I could beat this down and get it to follow the correct contour, because this little piece right here was not exactly the right angle, but it is now. So I'm going to get my edges cleaned up. I've got them marked where the panel is sitting. I'm going to get the edges cleaned up, ready to weld to, and then get this pan welded in and jump to the passenger side. Okay, I got the edges all cleaned up so I can weld to it now. The camera's not picking it up real good, but it's clean. Now I've got it tacked or screwed down in a few places, and what I'm going to do is where it's screwed down, I'm going to tack it down, then I'll move my screws to keep it as close to the metal as I can get it all the way around, and then we'll weld up all the screw holes as we go along. Okay, so I went ahead and fit my passenger side patch before I welded the driver's side, just so I can get the welder over here at one time and weld everything all together. And I still have to clean up around the edges of this, and then I'll be ready to weld. Okay, we got the rear foot wells welded in. They look pretty good. Got a few welds to grind down where I bubble gum some stuff up, trying to fill in some holes in the old metal, but everything's pretty good. Okay guys, we got the floor pans welded in. Now, all four of them are welded in about 70%. The rest I'm just gonna seam seal after I grind down a few of the welds. Some of it's bubble gummed up a little bit where I had some holes blown in the old metal. Had to fill the holes up, pain in the butt. Still got a couple to fill, but I'm at a welding gas, so we're gonna stop where we're at. Now, the next thing I'm gonna do is after I grind everything down, I'm gonna seam seal the rest of the floor pans. Any other small little pinholes or anything I've got, I'm gonna seam seal those, try to keep this thing dry and keep all the fumes and stuff out from exhaust from being able to get in if I can. And then I'm gonna paint this, or hit the whole thing with a wire brush, put some rust converter on it, and then paint the whole thing, and it'll stay that way until we're ready for some carpet and some interior. Now, the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna change the deck filler panel, fix the rust in the quarter panels, fix the tail light panel. I'm gonna try to get that done in the next couple of days, because we have got to start moving on this thing. I'm losing time. I've got plenty of stuff coming up on this thing: transmission build, rear end swap at least, an engine build if I don't find a good used engine, different things like that. Putting glass in it, wiring it, brakes, everything. Fuel system. This car is pretty much just a shell with a few pieces of glass in it. We're gonna make this whole thing happen for around $5,000, and sometime before Thanksgiving, we're gonna be done with this so we can drive it at Daytona. See you next video.